Hi, I'm Scott Garibay, and this is a tabletop RPG module in a video. So what I'm going to do here is attempt to do is what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and give you a tabletop role-playing game module for any fantasy game out on the market that this could work very well with. So it'd be a general fantasy tabletop RPG. So this would be perfectly appropriate for any edition of Dungeons and Dragons, any Pathfinder, and then also Fantasy Craft, quite a few others. Okay? And so basically this is a go-to adventure for myself. I wrote this, and it's called Arcturus' Pet, right? And basically, so let's go ahead and dive in. So this is a go-to module that I use. I run almost any new players I have will end up going through this in a campaign usually. Maybe some of the some of the non-player characters will switch, but the adventure usually is the same. And I use it because it's one of the more it's one of the adventures I've been able to have a little more success in writing, and I really enjoy it. And there's good player response. So let's jump into it. So the player characters are traveling, and actually one of the ways I like to start my adventures is actually, I'll jump ahead. I'll usually give them. I'll say, it's been a month or two since your last adventure. I usually really try to use downtime to the player's advantage. I'll even, I'll let them. Sometimes I'll give them an entire level in players, especially if the game's been going well. I level my characters my player characters fairly quickly. But they're going to be, and you say, and you just came out of a dungeon and you're fat with loot, and you're going to give them one magic item right out of the gate, and you're going to give them some, maybe 500 gold or an amount of gold, right? So they should be like kind of on we just, finished an adventure, kind of an exciting state, right? And so they should be feeling good, but they should also have some stuff on them, which, they haven't been able to change. It's going to be magic items that are not particularly useful to them. Like if they're a fire mage, it's going to be a water, a +1, a water breathing ring, something that's not particularly useful to them, something they want to get to a new location and switch, right? But they should, they're coming off of almost like a holiday, like they really, everything's great, right? They're walking through a forest, just going to the next town. They don't even know what their next adventure is. And they probably want to switch out some of these magical items, sell it for gems, which are easier to carry, or sell it for magic items that are easier to use for that are more in line with their race and class, right? And so they're in a forest, a deep forest, and there's snow on the ground. Actually, it's not too deep, so you can see. I kind of like when I see this landscape, I see gray. Right, so there's clouds over sky and there's flurries, right? So there's snow falling, big flakes, and it's really, it should be beautiful, and it's silent, right? And so they're walking through the forest, and at this point there'll be a skill check, and so basically the characters they're going to get an opportunity. You should have them roll a sight or a perception check, whether or a spot or listen check. Any of those will do. And you're going to see if they can hear something or if they can sight something. So there's a single drop of blood about 30, 40, 50 feet away, or they hear a slight moan. It's very, very subtle. And so, at that point, you should trigger them. They should go into combat mode. They should all gear up and get, another thing I like to do when I'm GMing is I'll say, okay, explain, before we go into combat, I'll say, explain your character's state to me, and they'll tell me what armor they're wearing, what weapon they have out, and any other conditions that they want to put on. And the more they paint that picture for me, I might even give them advantages, like I'll allow them, you can carry a +2 to your first attack, even for just a good description, right? So one of the things once you get in. So this gets interesting. So basically, okay. So at this point, they follow a trail of blood drops, or they follow the sound that they hear. And what they find is they find a man who's obviously a wizard, and He's got 3 arrows in him, large, black, like 3 foot long, inch and a half, or I'm sorry, about half an inch thick uh, arrows in them, black. I'm sorry, excuse me, white. The arrows are white, and so basically these arrows look, the wounds look pretty wicked, and actually, and the wizard is slumped against a tree, and there's actually an arrow through his shoulder, which has him pinned to the tree. Right? He's got another arrow in his shin, and he's got another arrow in his stomach, and he has blood, everywhere, and he is in bad state. In fact, it looks like he's about to die. Right? So the player characters are probably going to run up to him, and at that point, he's going to cough, and he's going to give a speech. And this is Arcturus, and he won't give his name, actually. And he's going to say, please. He's going to beg the player characters. He's going to say, please. He'll raise his hand, because the first thing they're probably going to do is they're going to try to put a potion in him, or they're going to try to heal him, right? But the arrow that he's been struck by has a special property where any healing that's given to him actually it works in the exact opposite way, and it will cause it'll actually double the damage that he receives. So any healing given to him will actually double him, and he's at 2 hit points, and even beyond that, he has other states in him. He has 3 different conditions which are bringing him toward his death. This guy, he's going to die. It's part of the it's part of the story, and you'll see why in a minute. In one of the ways. So now, of course, no plan survives the enemy. Of course, the player characters are not enemies, but you need this guy to die, right? Because if it doesn't, this whole story kind of falls apart. Well, we'll get there. So I hate railroading, and if you can find, and you know what, this is my adventure, but if you can find a better way to handle this, more power to you, and actually switch it up, because I never want to railroad player characters. So Arcturus, he gives a speech, and he says, and he coughs, I'm sorry, he says, please do not heal me. It will only cause me further damage. He says, I am badly damaged. I'm in a lot of pain. I only have a moment. Please listen to me. And he says, my mount, he says, it has run away, and he says, and I'm deeply concerned for it. He says, Drogal won't understand. He'll be angry, and he's going to harm those people. And then he coughs, and he says the name of Grenville. Grenville is a local village that's very close, right? He says, you have to protect Grenville, but and then there's almost like a frown when he says this, but he says, more importantly, you have to protect Drogal. He won't understand. He won't mean to hurt them, but he will. And you got to find him. And then and so the players are going to start asking questions. Who's Drogal? And he says, please, my mount. You have to find Drogal, right? And then he's going to clutch, whoever's close to him. He's going to clutch their armor and or their wizard robes, and he's going to say, promise me, please promise me that you'll take care of Drogal, that you won't let him get harmed, and you won't let him harm anyone. And right now, the player characters are going to have to decide, right? They don't know this guy from Boo, right? So they're going to have to make their decision on whether to help him or not, right? So they're going to make their decision, and whatever's going to happen, and then he's going to pass. So Arcturus his eyes are going to close, and he's going to pass, right? So at this point, the player characters are there, and that's all they have, right? So they're probably going to. They're going to talk amongst themselves for a moment. They're going to decide if they're going to go find this guy's mount, right? And first of all, mount, that's usually a horse. Why would a horse hurt anyone, right? So that's kind of a campaign mystery. That's something I do in my games, campaign mystery. And so and basically whoever any of the players who say what the solution to the campaign mystery is first will actually get a benefit. And usually XP or I'll allow them to carry a +2 on their next skill check or something forward, something like that. So campaign mystery is what is this mount that's going to harm people, right? And so at that point, what happens is we go into, and so that's the first occurrence of what basically That's the first scene, and so your player characters will have to decide what they're going to do and how they're going to carry that forward, right? So at that point, the next thing that happens is they're going to search to see if they can find any clues about the mount. And it's snowing, right? So I remember, and the snow is literally 2 feet deep. Tracking this mount is not going to be a problem in the least, right? So behind the wizard, right, and this is the first time they see the tracks. Actually, they won't even need tracking to figure this out. The prints are all over the snow, right? And so, so basically, what you're going to find is they're going to find is these huge paw prints, right? And so if you have a ranger, a high-level ranger, they're going to, and they get a high survival roll. They're going to be able to tell what this is, or if they have a favorite enemy. This Drogal, Arcturus' mount, is a dire wolf, right? And so Drogal, so Arcturus, he's a 19th level human wizard, right? And so and he is you know, an aged wizard. He's been around, and he has 2 spell books, right? So these spell books are kept on Drogal. So Drogal is his mount, is a dire wolf. Now this is, you know, really very BA you know, mount, right, for a wizard. Not many wizards ride around on a trained direwolf, right? So actually, Arcturus does not use Drogal as like a combat mount, right? So basically, he's so old and so powerful that he's been with multiple adventurers, right? And so what happens is he's been with this on this, you know, with this mount for a long time. And so basically at that point, sorry, it's my phone. And so at this point, what he does is what he had been doing was he actually was with some adventurers, and he's been with teams who are entirely killed. And so he was with an adventuring team actually about 10 or 15 years back. That's how old a direwolf is. And they came across an entire pack of direwolves. And the fighters and everyone, you know, because the direwolf mother came out and, you know, freaked out because her pups were there, killed actually 2 of his party members, but they ended up killing all the direwolves except this one pup. And so Arcturus raised Drogal since he was a baby direwolf, right? So he cares deeply. So Arcturus cares deeply about Drogal, and when he raised him up, he used him as a mount. Now, again, you know, Arcturus, this guy is a serious, you know, a very powerful wizard. And so his spell books, he doesn't have 1 spell book, he has 2 spell books. And his spell books are a foot thick and 2.5 feet high, right? And by about a foot wide. And what he does is he mounts them on the back of a saddle that's on Drogal. So his 2 spell books are on Drogal, right? And so what Drogal would do is that, you know, every day when they would travel, and basically, you know, near the end of his life, Arcturus was traveling alone. He's a neutral good wizard, and he just travels and adventures and does good wherever he can, right? And so, and Drogal, you know, is his trained mount, and Drogal does defend him, but Drogal's never been trained, right? So he doesn't know. He's not trained in combat or anything like that. He's not a trained combat mount. He is a mount, right? And even that, it's not trained. He just loves Arcturus. He doesn't mind Arcturus riding on his back, right? So there's this, yeah, it's a pretty deep relationship between Arcturus and Drogal. So, so what happens is, so so what Drogal would do is when Arcturus and Drogal would be traveling, and then they would, you know, at the end of the night, and this was Drogal's favorite time, they would sit down. The Arcturus would, you know, use a spell, and he would bring up a campfire, and they would sit around the campfire, and Arcturus would turn around, and Drogal would just kind of sit down on his haunches, and then Arcturus would unbuckle the spell books and just open them up, and he had the saddle set so that you know, he could move some parts, and it would just hold his book there, and so his book would be on Drogal's side, open, right, and he would read, you know, his spell book while Drogal sat there, and Drogal was really happy this way. He was, you know, he really cared for Arcturus. He protected him and served as his mount, and really, you know, this was his favorite time of the day when Arcturus would just sit and read his spell books, which were literally bound onto the saddle that Drogal held, right, or had on it. And so, so basically, what's occurred All right. So at this point, the characters don't know any of this, except they do know that there's actually so a good ranger is going to know that there's a dire wolf, right? And that's what the tracks are. Also, basically, if they really jack up that survival roll or that knowledge roll, right? Well, there are other tracks, right? So there are tracks of 5 riders who have left no tracks. They're on horseback with horses that have horseshoes that leave absolutely no trace of them going forward, right? And so this might actually be a great combined skill, right? So that the ranger's saying there's something I'm seeing here, but I can't tell what it is. And then maybe the wizard comes in and helps with some knowledge, with a knowledge check as well. So you want to kind of get a little bit of collaboration going between your player characters to figure this out. But they're easily going to be able to track Drogal, because Drogal, and now they're going to see also Drogal is wounded. And so when they found the wizard, there was just a single drop of blood, but behind the wizard, like in a pyramid, is just this rampaged trail of blood and direwolf tracks, right? So Drogal has, the direwolf has stormed off, and guess what? He's headed straight toward Grenville, the small village that's close, right? So yeah, all right. So Drogal is there, and basically. So at this point, the player characters are going to go forward, and they have to decide if they're going to track the Drogal down. Now, this is something else I'll just talk about for my games. I always, in every single game I go into, I have 2 or 3 adventures prepared. And so basically, I always like to allow so that I don't railroad my players, they can walk away from an adventure. So your player characters may go, nah, that's terrible. Grenville's going to get eaten by, all the citizens of Grenville are going to get eaten by a direwolf. Tough luck on them. Let's go flip these magic items we got here. And so I would have another adventure ready. So I'm just saying you should have another adventure ready in case they want to walk away. I love to run games for heroes, but you cannot railroad a team, and you can't railroad people. And so that's important, player character information. So you want to make sure that they have another option, that they can walk away from this if they want to. And so and I'll be doing more adventures in a module, which you'll be able to and you can use those as well. So at this point, it's a decision point. They can step off the trail of this adventure and not complete it, right? Give them that choice, right? And but if they pursue Drogal, what's going to happen? They're going to ride after Drogal. They're going to fly, or they're going to run, whatever their transport options are. They're going to go as quick as they can, right? So Drogal is heading toward Grenville, right? And so what's going to happen is they're going to run for about 3 or 4 miles, and at that point there's going to be another perception check, right? And they're going to get a chance to sight, not hear. These guys are silent. Well, actually, these women are silent as a grave, right? They are going to run across Pug's crew. So Pug's crew is a group of 5 women assassins. They all wear white armor, white where the classes are appropriate, white cloaks, and they ride white horses. And in the snow, of course, that's camouflage. And so that's another campaign mystery. Does Pug's crew wear white all the time, or do they wear it just right now because it's camouflage? And it's something that you can allow your players to discover, right? Because if they ever, if this goes a different way and they're not able to defeat Pug's crew, or Pug's crew escape, if they try to look for them, they may be looking for 5 women who are all dressed in white, right? And they don't know, if that's the crew's normal dress, or if that's just their current camouflage, right? So, so for Pug's crew, basically, these are 5 women, and they all have different weapons, right? So the first woman actually has 0 weapons. That is her weapon. And actually, she has runes on her cloak, right? And she has a small spell book on her hip. This is all crap. She is a monk, right? And she will tear you up if she gets in melee combat. She will just wreck someone, right? So 15. All these characters are 15th level monk, right? And every single one of these is evil. So Pug, the monk, is the leader of the crew, and she is lawful evil. And then she has 4 females with her, right? And so the first has a mace, and she is a dark cleric. The second has a crossbow, and she is the rogue. And then there's one with a bastard sword, and she is the fighter. And then the fourth one has a longbow, and she is a ranger, right? And so this is a highly dangerous team, right? And excuse me, and so basically they went their entire so essentially they found Arcturus. They saw him in the forest and began, and actually they're usually on commissions on jobs, but they found Arcturus and they followed him for a few days, and they saw these spell books on his side, and they're absolutely correct. These spell books are worth a fortune. Not only are they worth all the gold that they're worth for all the spells that are in them, right? But so in addition to that, Arcturus is a member of the Order of he is a member of the Order of the Silver Unicorn, right? And so these books are especially valuable just to that order, but they're valuable to any wizard who you would come across them, because the spells are incredibly, this guy's, he's 19th level, he has every spell in the book, and so these spell books are extremely valuable, right? So they were just intending to take his spell books, right? So they came across them and they're like, hey, you got to give us your spell books. They ambushed him and they said, just chill. We're not going to kill you or anything. We don't want to kill you. We just want your books, and then you can go about your way. So unstrap them from the direwolf, lay them on the ground, and go about your way. Now Arcturus actually, he knows many of these spells by heart. He's extremely powerful, and he can walk away from these spell books. He really can, but he decides not to, and the reason why is they have a special spell in them, which Arcturus is ashamed of it. He's been carrying it for a while, and he kept it for a specific reason, and he shouldn't have it. It's actually an evil spell, and the reason why was he was thinking about going back and trying to undo a mistake, which was going back to a specific location, not trying to travel here, to a specific location and undo something bad that occurred in his past. And he was even considering taking an evil course to do this, right? He was struggling with it, and he had chosen not to. So he was ashamed to have this spell found in his spell book, right? So so at that point, you determine. So he says, no, you're not going to take these. Let's do it, right? And he grits his teeth, and he gets down off of his horse, off of Drogle. Drogle bares his teeth, and they go at it, right? And now he does not make one mark on the assassins, right? They're having a good day, he's having a bad day, right? And basically the assassins have all kinds of tricks, and they riddle him with arrows, beat him with the mace, and basically the event is what the player character saw. So basically that's it. That's all you got, right? So you see Arcturus pinned to that tree, and that's what happened. And the only reason that they left him alive in the state they did was so they could run after Drogle and not lose the spell books, right? So Arcturus is actually dead. Drogle has the spell books, and Drogle he's got arrows in him, right? And he is freaked out. He saw Arcturus die, but Arcturus commanded him, go, Drogle, go. And actually, Arcturus, he didn't even know this, but, he cared about Drogle even more than he cared about his own life. And so he commanded Drogle to run away, right? And so Drogle did, but then he freaked out, and he tried to come back, but he couldn't find him. And Drogle couldn't find Arcturus, and then he wants to find the assassins, and he wants to kill them. So he's confused, and he is frustrated. And so you got a confused, frustrated direwolf, and he wants to kill Pug's crew. Pug's crew want to find him so they can get the spell books, and now the player characters are right in the middle, right? And that's where you want them, right? So so basically now the next thing that happens is the player characters come across Pug's crew, and this is a fun scene. So Pug comes up, and she's the only one that speaks. All the rest of them just stare right at the player characters. All these women are beautiful, right? And so two of them have red hair, two of them are blonde, and there's one brunette in there. They all look similar, right? About 25 to 30, and then essentially they're very beautiful, right? And they're all human, right? And so basically at this point they'll actually ride across the path of the player characters, right? Player characters. If the player characters have their arrows out, have their weapons out, Pug will immediately say, "No need for arrows, no need for weapons. We're all just going about our way." But before, through this forest, lower your weapons would mean you no harm, right? Pug's crew, they get killed. They get paid to kill people. They don't want to kill these player characters for nothing, right? So so basically, combat is having combat with Pug's crew is a privilege, right? Like you either got paid to be killed by Pug's crew, or it's a privilege to fight them in Pug's opinion, right? So she's not going to break out and just fight a random group of player characters. It's not how she rolls. She's smarter than that, right? Because she doesn't know them, right? And when they attack somebody, they know everything about them. They followed Arcturus for 3 days before they made their move. That's another reason why they were able to ambush them the way they were, right? So what happens is we get into it, and basically Pug will speak for the whole group, and she'll say, "Listen, she'll compliment them, right? So if one of them has a finely crafted weapon, she'll say, 'Oh, is that a weapon from XYZ?' And she'll know the blacksmith, or if you can, she's going to know a piece of information about where one of the player characters comes from, or where one of their weapons comes from. This should creep them out a little bit. Like this lady's, just from seeing them, she has some clues about where they come from, what they do, right? And Pug is extremely intelligent, right? Right. So at that point, it's going to be a little scary to them, what's happening, right? And so, or should be, and Pug's crew is scary, and then you want to get that across to the player characters. So, so basically, at that point, you want to, give them this idea of what's happening, right? So at that point, Pug will actually say, "Hey, here's the deal. We're traveling here, and we were escorting an older wizard, right? And we lost him in the snow. It's terrible." But we saw him a little while ago, and he can't be far off. We just lost him maybe an hour or two ago, and he's old, and he's doddery, and he's forgetful, and I think we just think he wandered off. So they're going to ask the player characters where Arcturus is, right? And one of the reasons why is they want to use Arcturus to try to find Drogal, because they're having a hard time finding Drogal, right? So they're thinking maybe it wasn't a wise idea to leave him alive, pinned to that tree, right? And then also, they want to know if the player characters have come across their handiwork to see if they saw this, what happened, right? If they saw what they did to this wizard, because they're assassins, they want to keep that, they want to keep that private, right? So, so the player characters are going to say, then there's going to be this tense moment, right? Where the player characters are going to hide it, and they're going to go, "Oh yeah, we think we saw some tracks, maybe 600 feet over that way." And then they'll go about their way, and they'll try to continue to follow Drogal, right? Or they might say, "We know what you did," and then bang, it's on, combat breaks out, right? So, excuse me. So basically, that's one of the things that that's going to happen, right? So this is a linchpin. This is a big decision point, and it's a branching point for the module, right? And so at that point, they have to decide what they're going to do, right? And so at that point, they decide what they're going to do, and then they continue forward with that decision. So if there's combat here, the combat's going to occur. And just so you're aware, again, I don't railroad characters. 15th level characters, basically, these player characters, they may need to escape. They may be bloodied. One of their players may die. All kinds of things can happen. This is a branching point, right? If they do defeat Pug's crew, right, or if they're even able to take one of them as anybody but Pug, if they take any of the women but Pug, they have a chance at getting information out of them and determining what happened. And then you tell them the story that I just told them, that they were following Arcturus, so forth, right? So combat occurs, and if they're all dead, that's the end of your campaign. If all your player characters are dead, that's the end of your campaign. If they kill all of Pug's crew, then basically at that point, you're still kind of going in a linear manner here, because essentially they still need to stop Drogal, right? And now Pug's crew, if they do get Pug, just having an understanding of what the dire wolf looks like, what's on it, if they learn about the spell books, all that, you should give them a +2, +4 to catch Drogal, to continue the tracking rolls, the survival rolls, to catch Drogal, right? And you would use defeating Pug's team if they get information from them that should help them to pursue Drogal and get Drogal, right? So at this point, the combat's going to occur, and they're going to come out of this bloodied. They're going to come out with one less player character, or they're going to come out with more information and some sweet magic items, because Pug's crew has great magic items. The cloaks are actually all their armor, all their cloaks have protection on them, have multiple spells on them. All of their items are +2 at least, with additional properties on them, right? Okay, so that's Pug's crew. So at that point, they're gonna go on from there, and they're gonna continue to follow Drogal. Drogal is headed straight for Grenfell, and so at this point, you want to tell your player characters, listen, you guys know, basically. Oh, that's another one. They'll find it if they don't know where Grenfell is. They may already have been there, right? That's up to you, depending on what's happened in your game. If they've gone through a small village, you can use that small village instead of Grenfell. But if they know about Grenfell, they'll know that Drogal's headed straight for it, and they know that if a direwolf walks in, if an angered direwolf runs, bleeded, and confused into the middle of a small village, he will kill like 30, 40 people, maybe the whole village, right? And they don't want that to happen if they're heroes, right? So basically, at this point, they're going to have to decide what they're going to do, right? So they're going to continue to run forward to get him, right? To get Drogal. So at that point, they pursue Drogal, and at that point, they need to see if they can catch Drogal before he reaches Grenfell. And you want to tell them this is this is the point where you determine what's going to occur. You give them a skill check to say, okay, you give them some skill checks to track, but then there's going to be a point where you need to give them a skill check to rush and say, if you make this skill check, you're going to be able to catch Drogal. If you don't, you will not be able to catch Drogal, and he will reach Grenfell, right? And you want to let that stand, So they may come to Grenfell, and he's killed half the people, and he's sated, right? And he's like kind of dopey from all the flesh he's eaten, and they might need to kill him. They may need to kill Drogal if they fail this role, right? If they succeed it, right, then they're going to find him very close to Grenfell, and maybe even they'll see the the city in the background, right? And there's Drogal, and they call out his name, and he turns and he rushes on them, and he tries to kill them, right? Because he's so angry, right? At this point, he's going to try to kill anything, right? And again, Drogal's not evil. He's just sorrow-stricken and confused and enraged by Arcturus' death, right? So at this point, they're gonna go and they're gonna find Drogal, and then when they find Drogal, right? Especially if actually it's a pretty sad story if he's already met Grenfell, because he's gonna kill half the people in the village, and maybe the villagers are able to put him onto the outskirts, and still they'll need to find him. They'll need to put him down, and at Grenfell, if anybody lived in Grenfell, they'll give all their gold to have this thing put down. Of course, that's another way that the adventure can go. So, but if they get there, and they get to Drogal, and they find him, he's going to turn around, and they're going to have a combat, right? But now's the point where you want to kind of do the movie, memorization, remembering scene, and you'll say, as you guys go into this combat, I just want you to remember Arcturus clutching your robes, clutching your armor, and saying, don't harm him. Don't harm Drogal. Make sure he doesn't harm anyone, and don't harm him, right? So Arcturus' call to the player characters is save Grenfell, save Drogal, right? And Drogal will be fine. If Drogal can be brought down, calmed, and can just even have 5 minutes of not remembering his Arcturus' death, he can be walked through. He's actually not really a direwolf in many ways. He's raised by a wizard, right? So he's a beast in his inherent nature, but he's not really a beast as far as his heart, right? And he's really Arcturus' pet. That's the name of the adventure, right? So really, that's the best and the most beautiful ending of this adventure, which I have seen, and it can be really quite touching, where Drogal is, if there's a druid, sometimes they can use handle animal. Sometimes I've seen player character groups bind. I've seen this done in a lot of different ways. I've seen a druid use handle animal on him. I've seen another group kill him outright because they're like, hey, we can't handle animal failed in a different situation, and they said we got to put him down because if he gets into Grenfell and he kills even a single child or it kills anyone, that's just not this is a creature, right? So different player character groups handle this in different ways, right? And so I've seen player character groups just take Drogo down, break their promise to Arcturus to take care of Drogo, but also they do save Grenfell, right? So I've seen that. Another one is I've seen a wizard who used a levitation spell and just put the dire wolf up into the air, right, and let him like blow off steam for like a full day. They threw meat up to him to feed him, and then when he calmed down, they brought him down, and they actually had to hide him because Pug's crew was still looking, so they actually levitated him. Actually moved him through the air, to a cave, hid in the cave, fed him for a day, brought him down, and actually, they brought, they brought in people from the village to help, with lots of food, and just calmed him down. And once he's calmed down, he's okay, right? He's actually domesticated, right? So that's another one. Is actually he's already trained as a mount. So if you're willing to do that, you can actually give him to one of the player characters as a mount, because he's going to need one, because he that's all he knows what to do, right? That's all Drogo knows how to do, is to be a mount for a human. So that's another ending to this story. And so basically, so you want to give your player characters this, you want to give them the drama of what's happening, and really give them this sense of how important this was to Arcturus, how much he loved Drogo, and then this is the end point, right? So. And then and essentially they either kill Drogo, which is pretty sad, and then they might have to leave because Pug's crew is still looking, right? And Pug's crew, and they should leave because Pug's crew is going to do it. They already killed one dude to get these spell books, and they will more than now. They have an incentive to kill that group of player characters, so they want to get all the gear and go, right? If they get the book, and basically, and they probably should bury Drogo, right? That's another ending I've seen, is them burying Drogo and saying a few words, and then also there's often fights between the different player characters, not fights, but just disagreements, over should they go back and bury Arcturus, because they're like, hey, we barely lived through our first encounter with Pug's crew. Are we going to be, if they find us again, are we going to, we don't have time to be burying that old dude. We got to get moving, right? So, and then you have a lot of story hooks. You have a lot of adventure hooks. What's that secret spell in Arcturus's book, right? Or returning the books to the Order of the Silver Unicorn, right? That's really important, right? Because they really want those books. But you also don't know that and also they can spend an entire adventure just researching Arcturus and seeing what he was about and what he did, right? So there's a lot of jump off points from here. And then Pug's crew, if they didn't kill each other, they still exist as a major group that needs to be dealt with, and so that can be a reoccurring villain. Love reoccurring villains, right? Yeah. So this is my adventure in a module, and this should be everything you need to get running with this story. And it's pretty modular. You can fit it into a lot of different fantasy games. I've had so much fun. I've run this at least a half a dozen times for different groups, and I love it every time. And one of the things I love about it is it's super fun for me to run again, because I never know what the outcome's going to be. It's always a different outcome, and so and if you do run the Adventure in a Module, Garibay's Adventure in a Module, Arcturus' Pet, please let me know the outcome. I would love to know what your player characters decided to do. And thank you very much.